Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Work have you stressed? Ready to report to the office with some extra enthusiasm? Well, don't make like a postal worker just yet. Maybe some have it even worse than you. So, drop the homicidal attitude, but not your guard. It's time for one hellish employment opportunity that Doughboy420 likes to call. What is ICARUS?
I watched as the viscous, crimson substance sloshed within the tank of the observation room, like thick, decaying blood that stretched out with tendrils of slime that slapped against the walls, splashing the goo onto the ceiling. It was restless, as it always was at feeding time. The crew brought in another mountain goat. The poor thing screamed in terror, as if it knew what was about to be inflicted upon it. The creature was dropped through a small opening in the top of the tank, where it splashed down into the murky pool of sanguine death, whereupon it was devoured by the blood-like muck, melting both flesh and bone of the goat to a disgusting liquid that was quickly absorbed into the red-hue slime. After the goat had been broken down to its most basic form and absorbed into the liquid mass, the liquid would then settle into a pool upon the floor before it would begin to bubble as if it were boiling. But the thermal cameras that were in place around the tank viewed no change in temperature. Then it would settle down and pool once again. But this time was different. This time, instead of settling back down, the viscous red slime began to kind of swirl around within itself, showing a new reaction that we had never seen. The liquid swirled into a pool that drained down through the center, where a cone of the lighter-colored, sanguine goo shot up from the middle to stand a good 8 to 10 feet off the floor of the tank. The pool around the cone appeared like thick, coagulated blood, but the cone itself appeared to filter out of the thickness and chunks of the slime to form a more pure red, fresh blood color. Then the cone began to take shape. It broke off at the sides and changed form from a swirling mass of liquid to a more solid form, arms forming at its side, and a head peeling out of what was the thing's back to swing forward and stare directly at me through the glass with a plain, featureless face. The head connected to a thin neck that should not have been strong enough to support the cranium above it, and that neck in turn led into a set of ribs with a thin, red membrane stretching over them, stretching so thin that it became almost clear, revealing the contents of what was inside. Death. Bones. Skeletons of all shapes and sizes. Rotten flesh clinging to the bone. The thing's torso appeared to stretch on forever inside, while the thing's body was not much different in shape than that of a human being. Aside from every other feature the thing had, its general shape was pretty much human. But inside its chest, beyond its membranous ribcage, an entire world of death and decay. Bodies lay rotting as far as the eye could see into the beast's chest, corpses in all manner of species that were both known and unknown to me. The thing's stomach poked inward from the stretching of the chest to form a smooth surface that transitioned back down into the cone of fluid that then, in turn, transitioned into the darker colored slime of the tank. The face of the being then changed once again as a single massive eyeball bobbed to the surface of the thing's semi-liquid face, bloodshot with a brownish-colored iris. The eye blinked a couple of times with an eyelid made of a membranous layer of flesh, similar to that of the flesh on its stomach. The ocular sphere swayed from side to side, looking around the room before shifting once again, splitting at the center with a jagged edge and opening wide, like a mouth filled with millions of teeth of all shapes and sizes, fangs, molars, tusks, all in an asymmetrical array stretching back into the monster's black, hollow throat. The creature's arms then stretched out to become unnaturally long, as if anything about this thing was natural. Then the thing's arms split into several fingers, dozens of them on each hand, and each finger was itself the length of a human arm. Finger-shaped appendages all twisting and bending at their large knuckles, cracking and snapping as they formed into existence. The thing's stretching arms then shot forward, fingers all slamming against the clear surface of the tank where they smashed back into the liquid, giving an appearance that the fingers had been obliterated down to blood at their tips. Then everyone in the room was hit with a headache that was so intense that it destroyed all other senses. My vision was faded and blurred in patches before it was eliminated entirely, leaving me in darkness. So too was the sound of everything. The sound of everyone's screams of pain and fear were suddenly snapped away with a loud pop, as if my eardrums had permanently ruptured. My mouth was filled with the taste of rot and decay before that too was replaced by nothing. I could not even taste the natural taste of my own mouth. There was nothing. Same too with my sense of smell. Before, where I could smell the coffee at my workstation, now I could smell nothing. I could not feel the sense of air passing through my nostrils to be able to form a smell. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. All of my senses were gone, replaced by only the sense of extreme pain within my head, beating inside my mind. Then I was able to see once more, and taste, and hear, and smell, and I could feel the heat of a fever. The feeling of my entire body shutting down, cell by cell, failing as my body slipped away. Then I noticed that I was no longer in the observation room, but instead I was inside the beast, in a world covered by a reddish-colored mist, in a world filled with decay and death. I stood upon the bodies of endless dead that stretched out in every direction. They belonged to beings of every shape and size, human, animal. There were many that didn't match any known creature in the human mind, some belonging to Earth and many others from elsewhere. Unknown things from unknown places. All of them victims of plague, famine, starvation and pollution, corruption and disorder. All of them consumed by the beast in one form or another. And it was then that I was able to grasp what this thing was. This liquid mass that we had held within a tank. This thing was something beyond us. Something beyond anything we could ever hope to comprehend. It was powerful, infinite. This being was like a god, but also the antithesis of God. It was like the Lord of Disease, like a harbinger of plague and death. Then suddenly, just as the chaos and pain in my mind had begun, it subsided into nothing, and the vision of the horror faded away from my eyes like smudges on an oil painting, until I was standing in the observation room once more. The smell of coffee filled the air again, replacing the endless smells of death and rot. I looked around the room. Everyone looked sick to their stomachs. I mean, more so than usual when we were forced to watch some poor animal melt into oblivion over these past few months. Everyone had a terrified look in their eyes as well. The same look we all had when we lost a sample shipment of this stuff a month or two ago. Luckily, that didn't cause a global disaster, because now we knew that this thing was something very dangerous. Something we were extremely ill-equipped to handle, but still something that we had to keep contained at all costs. We weren't the big government agency that you would think would come with the territory we were given. We had little funding, which was amazing considering the shit we were working with. We dealt with serious, world-altering or ending stuff, but we didn't have shit for funding because we weren't a government entity at all. We didn't exist. We had some crossover with the military at times, but we were a private entity with limited resources and limited pull. But after seeing something like what we had all just witnessed, I started to think that might begin to change. I looked over at my friend Todd. It was his first time in the observation room for this thing. He had tears in his eyes. He was scared. The same went for Joanne, who was seated next to him. Kenny, the security guard, was on his knees. The man had thrown up out of fear and now just kneeled there, confused. It didn't only affect us either. People several rooms away felt the effects of this monster. It even resulted in a man having a heart attack and dropping dead on the spot in the research library down the hall, a good 100 yards or so away. This thing's sensory-altering abilities had the range of more than a football field in every direction around it, and everyone within that radius felt the effects of the hell world within this thing's core, to some varying degree. This was the only thing that we were able to ever truly contain, and now here we were, completely out of our league, and completely at a lack of knowledge of even the first step of what to do beyond this point. We never expected this thing to be this. We just studied weird effects from this thing. We didn't know what it was. When we first found it, it was pooled up in a forest in Kentucky, leaching off the trees and other plant life. It didn't melt through plants like it did with animals. Instead, it consumed them in a different manner. It sucked the life out of them, bleeding them dry of their energy, leaving each plant a fragile husk of its former self, hollow on the inside and brittle on the outside. And it didn't have to come in direct contact with the plant to suck out its life force. That's why we weren't ever able to keep any plants alive in any of the rooms that immediately surrounded this observation room. Just being in the vicinity of this substance would cause the plants to wither and die within hours of exposure to the area. It was easy to contain. It could be held in a metal box, and was easily held within this bullet-resistant glass tank, the same tank that we blew a sizable chunk of our funding on. But I soon found out that it wasn't money blown at all, but instead money well spent on containment, much needed. However, though it could be contained within certain materials, others did not fare so well. Pretty much anything organic was melted down into a puddle and absorbed into the hell within the beast, while other materials, such as precious metals, were heated to their melting point, sending steam and smoke into the air as they were broken down to their purest form through some kind of fission, where they too were absorbed into the thing's core. There were very few materials that did not fall victim to the chaotic and destructive nature of the beast. We would stamp each container with an acronym of our little group, which I always found to be a bit odd. If we were some secret group that no one was supposed to know about, why stamp our name all over everything that goes in and out of our little facilities? The Institute for the Care and Alteration of the Reality for the Underprivileged of Society. ICARUS, a non-profit agency built to aid in the lives of the less fortunate. It was kind of disgusting when you really thought about it. The lie that we were told to tell if anything of our existence ever got out. We were supposed to lie and say we were a glorified homeless aid program. But that wasn't true at all. Well, a lot of us did seem to donate to charity a lot more after joining this place. So I guess it wasn't entirely false. But in reality, after seeing what we did, a little charity makes us feel better about ourselves, I suppose. Our real purpose had nothing to do with that, though. We were a secret organization that was created to contain and study things that should not exist. Cursed items, ghosts, demons, cryptids, immortal killers. And now, I guess we also had to deal with freakishly powerful, godlike beings that could probably melt our brains with some psionic abilities. Our real name was actually the Initiative for the Containment and Active Research of Unnatural Specimens, ICARUS. And up to this point, we had just dealt with minor containment of cursed and haunted objects, and mostly just research on what to do with everything else. As I've said before, and cannot stress enough, we were not prepared for anything like this, which became all the more evident by what happened next. Spoke an echo of 1,000,000 voices, all whispering in different frequencies within my mind. The words, spoken in English a bit louder than others, layered over top of the same phrase, spoken in hundreds of different languages, some familiar to me, and others completely unknown. But I knew they all spoke the same words. I looked around the room at my still terrified friends. Todd had hightailed it out of there by that point in an attempt to find one of the higher-ups to figure out what to do, but everyone else had nearly crapped themselves in shock. The creature spoke.
Free me.
The layered voices within our minds spoke once more, this time more demanding than the last. Sir? One of my colleagues spoke up. Why do you wish to leave?
To hunt. To corrupt. Free.
The being within the tank answered in our heads, his voices echoing within our inner ear. I'm afraid we can't do that. Sir, I'm sorry," my colleague answered the beast. This was followed by a period of silence from the thing before our heads were filled with a loud, ear-piercing screeching, like the sound of a train's brakes upon a heavy metal railway beneath it, but magnified by 100 and deep within our skulls, as if the sound itself was trying to claw its way out. Then the thing's massive hand pushed harder against the glass, its finger-like appendages forcing their way forward, tendrils of liquid coiling off of them and spiraling into the glass, slipping through the cracks of the glass at a molecular level, breaking it down on the inside so that it could penetrate through to the outside, slowly creating visible cracks upon the surface of the bullet-resistant glass. Then, with one more great push from the beast, the glass changed and shattered to the floor on the side of the tank, allowing the red goo that the beast emerged from and consisted of to spill out onto the floor of the observation room. Everyone screamed in fear and ran for the door, but the thing paid no mind to anyone. It had its mind set on something else, some unknown destination or subject of interest. It pushed its way through the doors and out of the room. Security tried to stop it with bullets, but they just ended up passing right through it and hitting innocents on the other side, killing and injuring a few coworkers. They even broke out the flamethrowers that were on hand just in case for such an occasion. The fire would scorch the outer flesh of the beast, but it would just be replaced by a new red-tinted skin as fast as it was burned away. The beast melted its way through the walls and through people, destroying a small chunk of our research in the process before it finally reached the bunker doors to the outside. The thing melted through our final line of security at the exit of the facility before it pried open the large titanium doors. Then suddenly, the creature shrieked in pain and reeled backwards, away from the sunlight. The thing's liquidy flesh began to sizzle and smoke as the rays of the sun beat down upon it. The monster's humanoid body attempted to crawl away from the light of the sun as the rest of its goo-like state was reverted back to a crimson liquid puddle upon the ground. With the help of the sun, we were able to contain the creature once again, making sure to lock him away in something a bit more secure this time. Something more solid. No more glass. Even if it is bullet or explosion resistant, it's probably not demon god resistant. We discovered some very, very vital information that day. The beast couldn't take the heat. Sunlight could kill it. And not only did sunlight hurt it, but other forms of artificial light were also able to damage parts of it. But it would always heal itself nearly instantly unless the portion of it was exposed to the light and removed from the rest of the beast's body. It definitely wouldn't be easy to keep this thing in check, but at least now we had a major weapon to use against it, and maybe now we could get a little more funding, especially since we needed a new containment cell for this thing.
I suppose some experiments you run may not be what they seem. Sometimes the subject may be experimenting on you. I sure hope you hold up well for going euthanization. But if you're still among the living next weekend, make sure to come back again for more of that terror you desperately desire. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can experiment on you all again next Saturday.